Hi, my name is Sam, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be wrapping up the three-part video series that I had started. This is going to be 3 of 3. If you did miss the previous videos, those are going to be down in the description below, and then as well I'm going to create a separate playlist so you can find them. In the first video, I covered mainly just general tips and things like that to kind of get into the correct mindset on to make comics or to make art in general. Number 2, I get into the nitty gritty about the steps from A to B to C to D, so on and so forth, on actually creating the comic, getting the wheels moving for the comic. And in today's video, we're going to be kind of talking about, okay, you kind of have your comic good to go, general tips on what you need to actually get the thing finished and sent off to the printer, and then some general tips for printing as well. So let's go ahead and get into it. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about is saving time. So there are a lot of people in the art community who are strong traditionalists, and I happen to be one of them, where it's a lot of my work isn't digital. However, it's okay to make exceptions. And for myself, it's doing dialogue and lettering digitally. Find a good digital font, find some good speech bubbles, drop those bad boys in and do it that way using an Ames lettering guide. I know how to use one of these things, and it's fun to use them for sound effects, things like that. But when you're actually doing it dialogue on page by page by page by page, it takes forever. And to doing it digitally, it saves you a lot of time, it saves you a lot of effort, and then ultimately you're getting your comic done faster. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up in terms of saving time is I do not work on 11 by 17s like most people. I will work on 9 by 12 Strathmore Bristol, and again, it's a time saver, so that's one of the main things that I do that for. You're not putting as much detail, as much drawings, and not spending as much time per page. Ultimately, that's leading you into, okay, I can't fit this onto this page, it's got to move to the next one, so then you're producing more pages in the long run. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about is when you are doing your comics, make sure that you're bordering them off and looking to see where you're sending your comic in terms of printing and what they need from you when you're going to lay out your pages, scanning them in, getting them ready for files, all that kind of stuff. Do a little bit of research on, what you're doing locally, if you're going to be using Mixam, and see what you need to do to actually get it sent off to the printer for them to accept your files. So if you're making a comic and it's your first one, you're probably a little lost when it comes to paper types, what you should be doing, how it should be bound. What I would recommend to do is looking up papers. So there's a couple of things that you need to worry about when it comes to paper and paper types. Brightness level, and that's going to be your weight. So what I mean by that is, so your brightness level, so the higher the number, so that's going to be, 90 to 100 to 120, so on and so forth. That's going to be a whiter paper. And then if your pounds, the higher the number, the thicker the paper is, so like 100-pound cardstock, 110-pound cardstock, so on and so forth. That's going to be, more stiff, and it's going to hold ink better. It's not going to feel as flimsy. So those are kind of things to think about. And then as well, the finish and then the coating on it. Is it a satin? Is it a matte? Is it glossy? That all affects how your comic is going to look in print, and then how it literally changes everything. So when you go from an uncoated, it takes the paper will saturate the ink will saturate the paper more. So then it kind of takes away the brightness that like a glossy, comic would have. So it kind of gives it more of a vintage look. And if you are using like a lot of blacks, a lot of gray tones, and you're just slapping, inks onto your pages, using uncoated newspaper stock or just uncoated card stock in general is a good way to go, because it's not going to crush your blacks. It's going to make them look a little nicer. And then blacks on glossy paper makes it look over digital as well, in my opinion, even if it isn't digital. So it really comes down to, again, choosing your paper stock. So for myself, is what I like to do is like 80-pound cardstock covers. I staple bound it, and then on the insides, I would typically just do like a 60-pound uncoated paper. So it's not super flimsy, and it's also not too stiff, because I think if it's too stiff, it kind of weakens the experience, and it ends up being more of like just thick cards put together. And then when they go to staple that, it's going to be too thick, and you're going to have like this big thick book, rather than something a little thinner, a lot more pliable, an actual floppy comic. One of the things that I've found when sending your things off to a printer is making sure that everything is done into a T with how you want it. Because a lot of printers nowadays, if you're not going across a threshold where you're not spending, $2,000, you're not getting 3,000 copies made, so on and so forth, they don't care. Like, you send them the file, if it's up to like their standards in terms of printing, they're going to print it and move on. They're not going to give you proofs or anything like that. You can request a digital proof, like download one, but that's still just your eyes looking at it, not the actual printer. So if you are going to be printing a lot, like an actual printer is going to give you sheets that are before they actually cut them. You would sign off on those saying like, yes, these pages look good. I like how they look. And then they would then cut them, bind them, send you a book and give you like a printer's proof. Be like, hey, this is what the final product would look like. Do you want to approve this? And you say yes. And then they go through with the whole printing process and getting everything done for you. Most printers nowadays are all going to be small press digitals. So, 500 books or less, I would say, kind of categorizes it as that. And that's strictly, like I said, you dump your files in, you might get a PDF of a proof, kind of look that over, make sure that it looks good on your phone, but you really don't know what that comic is going to look like until you have it in your hands. So it could take some trials and tribulations of getting a couple of comics made and getting them sent back to you to kind of learn more about paper and what works better for your art and how you want your stuff to look. And like I said, if you're doing more colors, deep saturations, and things like that, I'd probably lean more into like that satin to gloss, kind of like what you would see in more modern comic books, your image books, so on and so forth. And then if you're straight black and white, slinging ink all over the place, and or you want more of a vintage look, go more into that uncoated paper. It's extremely hard to find newspaper stock. That's what a lot of people prefer. And if you're looking for a newspaper stock and want to do that for your comic, you're probably going to have to go somewhere locally to get that done. And from my experience, like Mixam is specifically, like that's the industry standard. That's the printer that I use. That uncoated paper, that's the way to go in my opinion. So after you send your stuff off to the printer, like you have your stuff scanned in, your levels are good, it's been touched up in Photoshop, like the graphics are done, everything looks great. You send it off to the printer. The thing to know is that there's going to be turnaround times on this stuff. From my experience, it's about 2 to 4 weeks worth of time for them to get the thing actually printed. And then it's about a week and a half to 2 weeks or so for processing and then shipment. Like I said, I've used Mixam for all of my projects. They do great work. I would probably move to a square bound book if it's like 40 pages and above, probably, to help mitigate just weird printing errors and things like that with full. That turnaround time kind of comes into play with your printer. So you're waiting that 2 to 4 weeks for it to get printed, and then you're waiting, that week and a half to 2 weeks for them to actually get shipped out to people, for them to get sent to you. Is what I do personally is I have the comic shops that carry my stuff. When I am going through Mixam, it gives you the options to add as many shipping addresses as you want, and they'll ship them directly from the printer to them. And you can do like cheap USPS options, and it saves you from having to get the books, go to the post office, ship them, so on and so forth. So it saves you a lot of time, it saves you a lot of effort, not so much money, because it's still gonna be exactly the same, but it saves you from having to jump through all those hoops to get books out to people. So if you do have comic shops that do carry your stuff, or if you have other people that carry your stuff, whatever, you can send it out directly to them, and it'll automatically deduct. So it's like, say you're getting 300 copies made, and you're saying, hey, I want to send 100 to this guy. It'll say you only have 200 available. I want to send 60 to this guy, so on and so forth. And then it just keeps deducting. And then whatever you have at the end was what will get sent to you. It's really nice and user-friendly in that respect. And then the other thing I didn't mention about Mixam as well is you can go on there and you can design everything from start to finish, from dropping your pages into the graphics, moving everything around where you want it to go, add in more pages, take out pages. It's very freeform like that, but once you kind of put that stamp on it and proof your work, it is unchangeable at that point. You can go in and you can delete like straight up pages, but then you're gonna have to start it out from scratch again. Like I said, that's what I use, and that's pretty much the industry standard nowadays, is using Mixam. So yeah, and then once you have your book in your hands, obviously you gotta sell it now. You can obviously you can go the Kickstarter route if that's what you wanted to do. If you think you have a good project that's in your hands to do so, that's the route that I'm going to be going on my fourth book that I'm going to be putting out this year. I think I'm going to go the Kickstarter route. So into the late fall, early winter is kind of where I'm planning to launch that. So you can do the Kickstarter route. You can just do the self-publisher route, which what I'm doing now is pretty much cold calling comic shops, cold emailing comic shops, and just hitting the pavement hustling. And I have books in 7 stores now, and then I have a handful of content creators who sell books online and whatnot that also carry my stuff. Grand schemes, probably like 10 or so businesses that carry my books, and then I ship them directly from the printer to them. So yeah, I have like 10 or so stores that carry my stuff. So send it from the printer directly to them. It's going to save you a lot of headache. And then, once you have those tracking numbers from Mixam when they do ship them out, send them over to whoever you need to email them their numbers so that way they know that the books are coming. So yeah, I think that's where I'm probably gonna wrap it up for today. Like I said, these 3 videos were meant to be comprehensive, just me speaking to the camera, giving you lots of information fast, so that way you don't have to sit through a million different YouTube videos to find all this information. You don't have to sift through a bunch of online forums. It's just my knowledge spit out at you. Pull out a notepad, take some notes, do what you need to do to take up all that information. Today's video was more about, hey, the thing is done, it's been scanned in, what do you need to do from there? My biggest suggestion is you just have to keep going, and you just have to keep selling and selling and selling and selling and selling. It's not necessarily about selling the book, it's about selling yourself. So put that into perspective a little bit, create relationships with people, create relationships with these shops, and then eventually you can kind of bring up that, hey, I make comic books, would you ever be interested in selling my books? And they're more inclined to do so, rather than coming in and cold calling it as you would. And like I said, I do that. I cold call places, I cold email places constantly, and more often than not, you never hear back, and that's just the way that it is. You just have to keep your nose on the grindstone, and just keep pushing forward, and eventually somebody's gonna say yes, right? So then I started at 0 shops, and like I said, I'm probably at about 10 now. So put that in perspective for yourself, and don't give up, and keep making comics. I will see you next time. Thanks for hanging out and talking comics. Peace, everyone.